Hello, everyone, and welcome to another meeting of the Research Triangle PowerShell User Group. My name is Mike Kanakis, and on behalf of Phil Bossman and myself, I'd like to welcome you all here this evening. Tonight, we're going to be talking about certifications in the cloud era, and our guest speaker tonight is Michael Bender. We're going to have him on in just a second. I am excited to talk about this topic because I know I need to do some work with certifications, and I have some preconceived notions that are probably not correct. Phil and I have talked about certifications in the past. We're sort of like old hat guys in the industry, and we've kind of got a ton of experience. And going back and doing certifications now doesn't always sound the most exciting. So this is a topic that we have talked about in the group a lot, and we're very excited to have our guest speaker tonight. First, let me welcome in my host, Phil. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I'm glad to be here tonight. And yeah, like you said, is that this is certainly an interesting topic, and it's one that's near and dear to my heart about validating your skill set, also in paper form, but also in justification. So this is cool. So yeah, Mike, welcome to the party.
Hello, gentlemen. It's good to be here.
Yeah, same here. Good to see you again.
It's always
So-
great to be on the Mike and Phil show.
Oh, man. So Michael is one of my favorite guests because he's always it's always a lively discussion, but we always talk about it's always career development, personal development. It's a good topic, and I feel like to give Phil and I a little bit of credit in the group that we run, there's not a lot of groups that are talking about this stuff, and we like to try to stretch the limits about what a technical group can talk about. So it's cool to have you here tonight, Mr. Bender, to talk about this stuff. And I'm going to start by throwing you with a little bit of a curveball. So before you get started, let me just tell for the people that are watching at home, um, your Research Triangle PowerShell user group is a user group that meets twice a month. You can find us on Meetup or at rtpseg.com if you'd like to join us. Everybody is welcome to join us. So if you're seeing this on YouTube, come and join us and you can join in the discussion. But for those of you who don't know Phil and myself, as I said, Phil and I have both been in the industry a while. I came around from the time of MCSEs and all these vendor certs, and they didn't always have the value that they sometimes have today. And I'd never really been a big cert guy. So here's my curveball for you, Mr. Bender. What's different about certs today than the paper MCSE cert guy that went and has to remember every conceivable switch that might be tested on a thing, but none of it is real world experience tested in the things? That's kind of my downside of certs and why I'm never excited to take them. How has the world evolved? How has the world of certifications evolved since the days of MCSE and having to know the Microsoft way to solve problems in order to get your certification?
Can you repeat the question? No, I'm kidding. You just told my presentation is over in like 30 seconds. Here's the big change. Microsoft uses the term role-based certifications. But if you look across all of the cloud vendors, GCP, Amazon, Microsoft, there's really no other cloud vendors that are worth talking about. And yes, I can say that because if you look at the market share, it's absolutely true. You look at all of their certifications, there's no silos like it was before. It's like, I took proxy server back in the day. I took IIS, you had to build up. I mean, exchange admins for years. You could be in your silo, be an exchange admin for 15 years, rock it out, blah, blah, blah. Nowadays, the way the certs are made, if you pass AZ 104, this is on a slide, you have met the minimum bar to be able to administer Azure. And this is the problem. The problem is you have some people when they're saying, oh, certifications doesn't mean somebody can do the job. My first question is, what's the job? Because a lot of people are thinking architecting. If you pass AZ 104, that doesn't mean you're building an Azure infrastructure. That doesn't mean you're designing it. What it means is you can spin up VMs, that you can monitor them, you can do some backup things, you can use RBAC, that you can do the basic administration things. I fully put my name on the line that if I had a company and if somebody passed AZ 104 and were changing careers, had just come out of like tech school or whatever, they were in an interview slot and somebody with 15 years of IT experience was in the other slot but have never touched the cloud, who do you think I'm going to hire? The one with the certification. For a couple reasons. One, they have a certification that's relevant. I know because they passed it that they have a set level of skills. And two, I fully believe that anybody that takes the time to actually pass the certification, it really shows how much they are interested in being a lifelong learner and continue building their skills. We'll talk about the whole paper MCSAs and MCSEs and what about if I cheat on the exam? I sum it up in one slide and we'll be done with it in about 5 seconds.
Okay, so just to clarify, so I am not down on certifications. I
Get down.
truly appreciate the value of going through the process. It's just at the end of the process, I haven't been in positions where the certification had a lot of value to me because it wasn't a requirement to get the certification, but really to get the knowledge that comes along with certification. So I never really sat for a lot of exams, but I've studied for a lot of certifications or individual pieces. Um, but one thing we didn't do here is, we kind of got started quick, and we said hello to you. We kind of didn't give you a chance to say who you are, what you do, and things like that. So maybe we should turn it over to you, let you introduce yourself a little bit, let people know who you are and sort of your background in the industry. So maybe this is a good time for us to shut up and let you do your thing.
How about I just jump into my slides because I actually have an intro
Perfect.
slide.
Perfect.
So is that cool? Can we do
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. I got to move some stuff around. I'm going to move you over there. You're over there now. Now we got to go this and hey, there we go. Can everybody see my slides?
Looking good.
All
Okay.
right.
First and
Yeah.
foremost, thank you for having me on here. I want to apologize is that this slide deck is a combination of 3 different templates and multiple presentations that I've given. And I had one of those weeks where I simply didn't have the time to refine it to the standards that I like to have things at. So if there's any funky colors or you notice that fonts are different, we're just going to have to deal with that. So
I'm thinking this is intentional. You keep us on our toes. It's all intentional.
exactly. So what we're going to be talking about tonight is certifications in the cloud era, just a brief chat about training your careers. And the rundown on me, I'm a technologist, teacher of things, and a community leader. Currently, I am an author evangelist at Pluralsight. If you ever want to hit me up, you can either do that on Twitter at Michael Bender or Bender at Pluralsight.com. I am the president and co-founder, found my first typo of the evening, of the Crew User Groups. It's a group on Facebook. We've been around since, it's like 2009, 2008. Through the tech ed and Ignite years, I've been in the IT pro space for a long, long time, much longer than that picture really gives me justice. My main focus is really the cloud. Azure's my main focus just because I'm a Windows person, but I do spend some time in AWS. I've done some labs on our platform in AWS. I also deal with PowerShell, automation, and then Windows Server. So if you ever want to see any of the work that I've done on Pluralsight, you can check that out. I've got my author link down there. Also, just a real quick, there's a GitHub link down there. That is a link to a markdown file that has all of the resources for kind of this talk. So I've got a running markdown file of that. So what's really ahead for us tonight is, let me go back here for a little bit. Yeah, I'm an author evangelist at Pluralsight, but that kind of really gives you what's been going on for the last couple of years. Prior to that, I was a cloud advocate at Microsoft for about a year and 3 months. And prior to that, I taught at a technical college for 13 and a half years. So if you know who Michael Teskey is, him and I taught in the same region in Wisconsin, not at the same school, but we were colleagues and that sort of thing. So I've been teaching, sharing, trying to help upskill IT pros for a very, very long time. So I love these opportunities to be able to come talk to people and, just help them upskill their career. So what do we have up? Should you get certified? So we're going to talk about, should you get certified? Yes or no? How do you pick a certification? What's the best certification for you to take a look at? And really, where do you get started learning? And should you get certified? The answer to that is going to be, Mike, yes, you should get certified. I am a big proponent of certification. So you should get certified or at least study for one. The reason is the current cloud certifications are really built so that if you want to learn Azure administration, the first thing I tell anybody, go to the AZ 104 exam, download the exam guide for it, and learn all of the things that are in the exam guide. Go from objective to objective, because the skills that are covered in there are what you need to become an Azure admin. It really provides you a study framework. And here's the way I think about it. A long, long time ago, I used to do Ironman distance triathlons. And anybody that's done any form of competitive, like whether it be a 5K, 10K, marathon, bike race, whatever, you don't just like wake up and go do it. If you want to do something like that well, you want to plan. So if I'm going to do a 5K, I'm going to do a 5K plan that's not just simply, yeah, I'm going to go run every day. I don't know how long I'm going to run, and I'm not sure where. You do it based on a plan that builds you up to a point where you're able to achieve your goal. That's why I think certifications are awesome, because they allowed you to build up. They provide you a framework, a way to train to become an Azure administrator. And at the end, you can get a certification, which I believe is a great thing to have on your resume when you're going for, say, that promotion or to get that new job. The next thing, and my buddy Phil, I think we're in the same house when it comes to certification, mentioned it's a great way to prove to yourself what you know. Because here's something that's important that I really believe, and I was going to call Mike on it before, is that he mentioned that none of his jobs, the certifications really don't match. To throw out a Don Jonesism here, your employer is invested in your job. You're the one invested in your career. So get certified to invest in yourself, in your career. And if it doesn't work for your employer and your employer isn't interested in the cloud, you probably need to find a different employer. It's going to make your resume and experience really stand out. We kind of talked about that. And I think it's really a great way to motivate yourself, because it does give you something at the end. Yeah, now you can have this like little badge that shows up on LinkedIn and, all of these things. But it's simply a way to give you some motivation. So even if you're not going to take the exam, just follow along with the guide and you'll probably do pretty well on any of those areas. And like I said, it provides a concrete set of skills and provides you the study framework.
One of the things you just mentioned that I want to just point out is that, again, is it motivates yourself, but also proves what you know. Is that, to your point, is that like I've taken some of the Azure exams, but my company is not really into Azure, but I wanted to prove out, like, do I know that information? Can I put it myself in there? And so I got my Azure stuff, but I work as a Citrix admin and user compute stuff. I'm like, okay. So I went and took my Citrix exam. And again, that's a Citrix world, and I'm like it was all entry level stuff because I worked as an architect, not entry level, but as an admin, and it really kind of proved out and refined the idea that like do you really know stuff? Me, I'm talking to the other architects when this is such BS in the questions, kind of to Mike's point. It's like nobody would ever do it that way. So you went and like look at these like test exams and practice exams going, you would never do it that way. In a perfect world, that is their answer, but like I wouldn't do that. Or in our environment, we do it this way. And yeah, in some worlds you put it that way, but at scale, you would never do it that way. It's kind of this game, but okay, you could do it that way. That's kind of my thought with some of the certifications is that you're kind of learning to the test, but also you're learning to what the company says is their standard. And to your point with the Azure certifications, like when I took that, I thought it was just I'm going to do this Azure thing, build VMs. But when I was so surprised in the Azure exams, is that okay? Here we're talking about NSGs, we're talking about and a bunch of I'm like all this networking stuff. I'm like, why is this in here? I'm like, but it's there, and it gives you that full rounded perspective of the Azure environment as a whole. You're doing certifications, you're doing NSGs and networking, you're doing a whole bunch of other stuff that it's like you're just touching on it. But I'm like, oh, okay, so now I understand this whole model. And we as architects kind of like, well, some of those silos are broken apart, so I don't really touch it much, but at least it's there, and it's a great background to give you that baseline, that baseline that you can do.
Yep. Yeah, you have to have that whole, that whole gamut of information. The other last thing of really, certifications, in the past haven't been like, oh, wait, you got a great certification, great. These provide career mobility, not only within your current organization, but probably when you're moving somewhere else. I'll just give you an example. A local company here, American Family Insurance, they've got over 900 people in their IT department. They were moving to AWS. They had their entire company, their IT org, get certified. So many companies that I talk to that are customers of Flowsite, not customers, the people aren't out there. If your company needs to do digital transformation and move everything to the cloud, you can't go out and you can't find the people to staff an entire architect team, engineers, admins. You have to train within. So you're going to see a lot more companies moving to this. The other thing I'll throw out, and it's not on here, if I'm a CIO and I need to know that my staff, all my IT people, are up to a minimum level of knowing about the cloud that we're running, there is no other way to be able to determine that your entire staff has a base level of knowledge of GCP or AWS or Azure or whatever your cloud is. So you're going to start to see a lot more companies, Fortune 500 companies, and it's probably going to move to a lot more that are going to start doing bulk certifications because it's how they know that their staff has some level of knowledge. Does that mean that the certification is exactly what your company does? No. That's always going to be an internal company thing. But what it's going to do is it's going to set the bar. And much of what you find in the certification are the Microsoft best practices. Maybe you don't do the stuff that's Microsoft best practice and you do it a different way. You can do whatever you like. But for the exam, it's always good to know those. So kind of, I should have put Mike's face on this because this would have been great if I would have put this on the slide. But I hear that the certs don't prove that you can do the job. I said this before. If you pass AZ 104, you have the knowledge to administer Azure at a minimum bar. But what about the cheaters and the paper MCCs? I know Mike wants to talk about this. This is all I have to say about this is that in life, you inevitably get what you put in. And if somebody cheats on something inevitably, it's going to come back to bite them. But here's what I say about this is if I were to have an employer come to me and go, I don't want to hire anybody that has a certification. It doesn't matter to me, blah, blah, blah. They might have, done a brain dump or whatever. If your hiring function does not weed out unqualified applicants through a proper technical interview, that is 120% on you as a company. You have more problems than hiring someone with paper skills if you're not weeding unqualified candidates out. And that's really my kind of, I know it's kind of aggressive, but that's really my take on the whole people going, I don't want to hire people with certifications or it doesn't matter because they might cheat. I'm like, then you're not doing your job. Nobody hires somebody just based on the fact that they do a certification. You give them a technical interview. If they fail the technical interview and they had a certification, you throw them to the back of the line. You go, get out of here. But if you don't do your job and you just hire somebody because they're certified, that is 100% on you. So I'm sure Mike
Well,
wants to say something about this, so I'll let him chime in.
well, you brought up this 6 or 7 points here that I could touch on. So let's back up a little bit to something you said earlier. So for the record, I am a proponent of certifications. I am a proponent of continual learning. What you're saying and what I understand and I agree with is that certifications, at least the cloud certifications I was talking about, they have more relevancy today. That's what we're really trying to say. In the past, you had situations where you have people who work a job, they're busy, they don't feel the need to take the certification exam because they feel that the skills that are being tested in the exam aren't relevant to the job they're doing, or like Phil had said, Microsoft or another vendor is asking questions and they're not even the same troubleshooting steps that you would use in the real world. So a lot of people sort of had this negative impression about certifications. And what we're saying now is that the certifications have gotten better, they're more relevant, they are actual representations of the real world. And one of the things that I wanted to add was is that as companies move into the cloud, a lot of parts of the company do not know how to handle that part of the process yet. Meaning, HR people are not very well versed in what it means to be a cloud person, what those skills are, what they should be interviewing for. So now they become reliant to look for people that have cloud certifications as a way to show some minimum level of competency for technologies that are so new in the company that maybe they don't feel that they have the relevancy to qualify if a person can or can't do this job. So I hear you. Certs are much more relevant than they should be, than they have been. One other point I just want to add is you touched upon something earlier on that I've come across at least 5 times now. So I'm a sysadmin. I do AD stuff now, but I came in through a help desk background, and I still work in a lot of client services stuff, and I try to mentor people in my organization and the other organizations I've worked with. Try to give some opportunities to people that are on the help desk, like when I was on the help desk. And one thing that I often find is there's, like Michael said earlier, is your your employer's skill set needs is not necessarily um, a representation of your career. So what I mean by that is I've had a few people that have come to me and said, "Oh, I wanted to go for X certification, or I wanted to learn this technology, or I wanted to do Y," and they don't have the money to send me for a class or something like that. And I try to explain to them that this industry requires time spent outside of work on skill set because your career is more than your employer, as Michael had said. And very honestly, a message that people need to know, especially younger people in the field, is that the next employer doesn't want to hear about why your current employer didn't have the money to invest in you. They just want to know what you know. And honestly, they shouldn't be worried about that. They should just know if you're a relevant candidate or not. So, um, a lot of good points you've touched on, Michael. I agree with everything you're saying. Um, I think the hardest part that people getting into this field have to adjust to is that this is not a 9 to 5 job for anybody. It's a continual investment in skill set for yourself that pays off later on, but in the beginning requires time. And the time invested up front pays off down the road. But without that time invested, it's very hard to move out of the lower level positions that most people get started in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, but definitely ton of good stuff there. So I think that kind of leaves us, why you should get certified. If you're still on the other side of the fence, there's probably not anything that I can do to convince you to go get certified. So let's, really talk about the barriers to certification, because I think this is where it gets tough for a lot of people. And I really break it down into three things: time, cost, and fear. And the time, you have to figure out, like Mike was saying, is that you're not going to be able to always do this on the employer's time, or they're on their dime. So you need to figure out, how much time can you commit to this? How important is this? How important is it to keep your career relevant? Then there's the cost. Certifications cost money. Depending on what it was, it's about 165 for the role-based certifications. It's 95, I think, for the foundational. Chances are you want to have some resources to use. So, it's probably going to cost you, two to four, $600, depending on what resources you do and all of those sorts of things. So there's some investments you need to make in there. And, the last really comes down to fear, is that I taught in the classroom for a long, long time. Most adult learners I know have some fear or test anxiety. I had so many students, I know so many people that know everything that's on a lot of certification exams, but they can't pass one because they can't deal with the anxiety of dealing with the exam. And that is a really, really real thing. And we're not going to talk about it tonight, but I have a lot of ideas that can help people really, try to make it easier. The part of it is really getting into a point where you're just confident about your skills. That if you get confident about your skills, that can help you to make that situation going in for the exam a little bit better. Just a little bit here. These are anytime I put up an average, I'm like, okay, we all know there's a difference between an average and a mean, and that, like the average salary, this puts into, you've got the people that are making 50K and you got the people that are making 250K, and it averages out. That this is from 2020, the top paying IT certifications, that virtualization and cloud certifications, average salaries around 136K, increasing from 2019. So, you think about it, the cost of the exam, 95 to 165. Cost of materials could be free, could be into the hundreds. Cost of your time, you decide. But you add all those up. Let's say you had to pay $500 every time you take a certification exam. So 500 for AZ 104, 1,000 for 303 and 304. Let's just say those numbers are kind of like sort of true. A $1,500 investment in that you could probably add tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to your lifetime earnings. I do a lot of financial stuff. That's a good return on your money. And that's a good investment in you. And I realize that, budgets can be tight. You wish your employer would pay for this. But again, this goes back to, you invest in yourself. But because what if your employer is not interested in this? You go and you get these certifications, you spend some time getting hands-on, you get to know this. You go find an employer that's with the times and is actually doing stuff in the cloud and is interested in you being a lifelong learner, and chances are they're probably going to pay you what you're worth. which is probably more than what your current employer is doing. And I know that's kind of like, kind of cheery unicorn and rainbows. But I really think that good people that have good skills that are lifelong learners, companies want to hire those people and they're going to pay them what they're worth.
Say it louder for the people in the back. You are speaking the truth.
Say it louder for the people in the back.
So there's a lot of facets to what you're saying here, and I wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying, but there's some individual pieces here that fall through the cracks. So first of all, I agree with the logic. The money invested will pay off, but um, the truth of the matter is that if you are at an employer that doesn't value the time that you're putting in or the money that you're spending, that may be time for you to evaluate your role in that company in the future. And the reason I say that is because the perfect case is company pays for all your certifications, all your training time, lets you do it on the company dime and all that during the day and all that stuff. That's the perfect world. It doesn't happen for everybody like that. But plenty of companies will reward you for the time you put it on your own and the money you spend, even if they don't reimburse you for tests. What I mean by that is if you could be on a team with a number of peers, and as you attain skill sets, you now open yourself up for opportunities in the company that other employees don't have, and you lose things that you did at your job that they don't no longer want you to invest time in because they now know that you can handle the more advanced concepts. So
Yep.
it's not always about jumping to another job.
Yep.
A good employer will recognize the time and the investment, even if they can't compensate you for it immediately. Usually pays off with extra responsibility at work, which usually ends up with better reviews and more dollars down the road.
Yep. And I'm not going to mention his name because I didn't get confirmation back from him that I could use his name, but there is a very, very prominent author, speaker, PowerShell person that may have worked at Stack Overflow and may now work at Microsoft that will tell you that the reason he has both of those jobs is because he was certified. So there are people out there, there are a lot of people out there that they get those jobs. And you look at Josh, we all know it's Josh. Come on. That you look at how he went about studying for that, and that is in itself the way he went about it. That's how you become a lifelong learner. That's how you skill yourself up, and that's how you take on these sort of things. And the way he went about it is really a blueprint for how you want to get skilled up on anything. And so we're going to spend some time talking about that. So what's
So
the
I want to
cost?
queue up. I just want to queue up a question for you that keep it in your back pocket. You talk about it when it fits in with what you're going with your presentation tonight. But earlier in the discussion, someone had asked the value of like getting Azure certified, and then all of a sudden I go to work in an employer that's AWS, or just if we put that in more general terms, if I invest in one vendor, one certification path, how does that, what does that do for me? How do people value me for the other clouds, even if I'm not certified in them? So we don't need to talk about that. Yeah, we can cue it in whenever you like, but that's a question that I thought was very interesting in the chat earlier. Maybe we could talk later about.
Yeah, let's talk about it now. Here's my thing. So I'm in Azure. I've always been working in Azure. We had an opportunity at work where we were doing cloud labs and we were starting out with all AWS labs. I jumped in and I could hit the ground running, or maybe a slow, fast walk to get to running because I understood the cloud. Here's what I think is that if you are proficient in one cloud, you can jump over to the next cloud. It's like developers that know one language that can jump over to another language. I'm not talking about like if you know PowerShell that you can then do Perl, because we all know the Larry Wall was absolutely crazy. And when he made that language, it was nobody wants to use it. But what I'm talking is that if if you know C sharp, you can go over to another language because you understand how languages work. If you understand how the cloud works, you figure out that EC2 instances, oh, those are virtual machines. S3, oh, that is simply storage. If you know a cloud, you understand the principles of how the cloud works. There are specific things that you need to get skilled up on. But if I were an employer and I were an AWS shop and I found an excellent engineer and their background was Azure, and I put them through the interview process, and they seemed to be a good fit. They had a good head on their shoulders, good team player, lifelong learner, all of the things. I'd hire them on the spot, because even if that I know, chances are they're going to be able to learn AWS and pick up our environment. And what I would probably do is I would probably invest in getting them certified to bring them up to speed faster, because they know a cloud already. They'd be able to skill up on it. So I don't see that as a barrier. I see it as a opportunity. Would I go out and get multi-cloud certified? No, just because actually I will be. I'm studying for the AWS certification because it's a work thing. But I don't think you need that to be relevant these days, because multi-cloud is not relevant yet. Maybe in a couple of years when people think multi-cloud is relevant, but right now I don't think that is. So does that kind of answer that question?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it goes back to the three things you pointed out before. That I think some of that comes into that fear category, and we can turn that around, and we can basically say that investing in a certification and the knowledge that comes with it, Azure, AWS, GCP, they have similar products. They do their thing a little bit differently, but by getting the certification in one area, it makes it easier for an employer to make a determination about your ability to learn, and not so much worried about, well, he knows Azure, he doesn't know AWS, or he knows GCP, he doesn't know Azure. More so, this person invested the time and they know the core concepts, as you said, Michael. S3 storage versus Azure storage, it's storage. They'll have to spend some time skilling up on the individual instance differences, but the concepts are the same.
Yeah.
So by investing in one and maybe ending up working in the other, it's not necessarily a detriment to your career.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's the cost of not getting certified? So I figured I'd be kind of dramatic here because I like to be dramatic. So really, the cost of not getting certified could really mean that you're unemployed. And let me share a story with you. When I started out in IT in 98, I worked for a large telecom, and we were just starting out. I worked on a 351 to 40 upgrade, and we had a number of mainframe programmers because we had a ton of mainframe, and these people had absolutely zero interest in learning anything new. That's why I like certifications, is because if you're in this industry right now, you're learning something new every day. And if you're not learning something new and you're not keeping your skills relevant, you're not going to be relevant and needing to be on this line very quickly. Is that the need for on-prem server admins, on-prem Exchange administrators, those specific roles? Sure, you might find them. Sure, you may be able to ride out one of those jobs at a current company where you're doing that, but to go somewhere else or to move forward, it's really a detriment to be stuck in a technology. That's why I think certifications are great, because they give you that motivation to move forward and learn new things, because that's going to make you consistently relevant as you move forward. So let's get to, really how do I pick a certification? So we talked about the job roles in the cloud and really broken up between things. You've got administrator roles for their entry to mid-level people. You've got your developer roles. You've got solution architects. There's security engineers. There's all kinds of roles. One thing I will add in here, Mike, you mentioned something about your HR people not really being skilled up on the cloud. That's why what the AZ900 and the AWS practitioner exam and the GCP, the practitioner exams from the cloud vendors are designed specifically for the non-IT crowd. So if you want to have the best HR department that gets the best people and can speak the language of the candidates, you have them take the practitioner exams. And like for the AZ900, all you really have to do is do the stuff on Microsoft Learn, and they'll know all they need to know about the cloud to get you the best people in the door. So once you know which job role you're looking for, then you need to choose your cloud. And this could be based on the current employer that you're with. It could be based on what you've been working with, which is probably a good way to go with it too. So let's say your employer is working in GCP, then it might be worth your while to go down the road and dive into GCP and get certified in that. Or if you're a Amazon shop, then going the AWS or the Azure. If you're none of those shops, pick the one that you think is going to be the biggest player. I'm not going to make any guesses here. I think that GCP is an up and comer, but I believe that Microsoft and AWS are really the big two to really think about. And I think that there's going to be a significant change in the amount what's being used, because I think a lot more enterprise uses Azure or will be using Azure because of the integrations with all of the, on-prem Active Directory, Microsoft 365, all of those. But that's just kind of my personal opinion. But make a choice, then you start going down a path. So let's say we take a look at the Azure certification path. Mastering the basics is the Azure Fundamentals. Even if you've been working with Azure, I recommend taking a look at the fundamentals, because the fundamentals focuses on things like costing, subscriptions, how objects work in Azure, how resources work, the basic fundamentals that even people that are building stuff in Azure, I would guess that if you're an Azure shop, you may or may not have some people that have spun up resources and cost your company hundreds of dollars because they didn't understand how billing worked. Azure Fundamentals will fix that for a lot of people. Plus, it'll also prepare you as you're moving forward. But if you've been working with Azure for a while, if you feel comfortable, if you've taken a look at the AZ900 material, starting out at the AZ104 gives you that administrator associate. Then you can move on to the architect expert level, which is going to be the AZ303 and the AZ304. So there's a design exam, and then there's I forget the name of the other one, but they're really, I was studying for 303 and 304, but something else came up at work. I had to shelve it. But they're really two exams that you should really kind of study at the same time, because there's a lot of overlap in what you're doing with those two exams. But let's say you're looking for some specialty to add on to that. Let's say you're just an Azure admin, but that's one of those things where that's actually supposed to be for the certification for the Microsoft Virtual Desktop, is they have a specialty for the Microsoft Virtual Desktop. Let's say you're doing virtual desktops in your org, or you want to roll them out. Your CIO comes in and he's like, hey, we need to roll out Microsoft Virtual Desktops. We need you to get it done. Boom. Go take that certification. Study for that cert, because it's going to provide you the framework of how to do it. You could sit there and just read the docs and, try to do it that way. Maybe that'll work. Maybe go and get the certification, see how that works. Architect design is 304, technology is 303. Thank you, Andy, for putting that up there. But that kind of gives you a path of the Azure path. So where are we going to start with all of these? So where do you start learning? So we already talked about it, choosing a path. Then you go through the process of acquiring the knowledge, which we're going to talk about. It's absolutely critical that you get hands-on experience, whatever cloud you're working with. Even though none of the clouds that I know of are doing hands-on right now, I know Microsoft, they got rid of all of their hands-on stuff when the whole pandemic started because it was having an impact on everybody's digital transformation, was having an impact on availability of resources in Azure. But that might come back. But I really, truly believe from all the certifications I've taken that you really have to understand how to do the things to be successful on the exam. And quite frankly, you actually want to know how to do the things. It's no fun just reading a bunch of stuff. It's fun building up these different environments and all of those sort of things. So, and then just simply going to prove your skills by actually sitting for the certification exam. So let's take I want to take a look. I'm going to go through a bunch of slides and then I'm just going to go and we're going to take a look at some stuff. So we're going to take a look at the role-based cert for AZ-104 out of Microsoft. I'm going to show you a little tool that's a little bit dated, but it's a way for you to be able to assess yourself to determine where you sit. And then we're going to talk a little bit about learning styles. So go out here, go here. Yes, I still use snipping tool. None from the peanut gallery back there. So if we take a look at the exam AZ-104, so the first place you want to do with any of these exams is you want to start out at gotchamicrosoft.com, take a look at the exam. Notice for this exam, notice here, the content of this exam will be updated on May 25th, 2021. Microsoft updates their exams every 2 months. How do you think that makes me, Tim Warner, and Mike Teskey, who just put out a course on AZ-104? Well, it keeps us busy, but it also keeps the content relevant. So we'll talk about those in a little bit. So you can schedule the exam here through person view. It shows you the skills measured. We can download and go to the skills outline. But one thing I want to show right here is that you'll often see underneath the certifications, they'll show you different free online training and instructor-led training you can get. Notice that they've added in here out at Microsoft Learn, they actually have a fairly nice path for Azure Fundamentals that go through all of the fundamentals that'll help you as you're going through and learning this. Would I use just the AZ-104 stuff on Microsoft Learn to be able to pass the exam? I've gone through some of it. Some of it's really good. Some of my former coworkers. I don't know if it has enough for you to be able to do it, but it might be an opportunity for you if you're short on cash and you don't have access to some other form of learning. That might be a way for you to go, is going through the Microsoft Learn, and they'll probably have some hands-on stuff to go with. But what's really important when you're studying for the certification is really going into the skills guide. And this is going to break down everything. So first we have these are the objective domains, or the ODs. So Microsoft breaks up everything into objective domains. Notice Azure Identities and Governance is 15 to 20% of the exam. And then it breaks each OD into functional groups. Notice we have one: manage Azure Active Directory, Azure AD, objects, and it breaks down all of the things that you need to know. If you look at some of these, create users and groups, there might be a whole list of things that falls into creating groups. how do I study for this and how did I, go about learning this stuff? I take this, I copy it, I go over docs.microsoft.com and I search for every single one of these. I look at the documentation at Microsoft for each one of those and I dive in. That is a great way when you're trying to learn some of these areas. So let's say you're cool with user groups, managing users and properties, but you need to really dive into SSPR, which is self-server password reset. I'm going to take that, copy that, go over to docs.microsoft.com. I'm going to paste that right in the search. Bam. There we go. Let's go take a look at SSPR. Go into, here's all of the things. Self-service password reset, deep dive Active Directory. That looks like where I want to go. And then once you get into Docs, if you're not using Docs, you need to be using Docs. This is when I worked at Microsoft, this was the number one thing that I tried to get people to using because it really is the place to learn. And Microsoft, because all of this stuff is based on GitHub, they try to keep it as up to date as possible. You also have the ability. I think we did a show on this with Tim Wheeler or Sean Wheeler a while back, talking about how you can actually go in and provide updates to this as well. But once you go in here, oh, okay, I can go how password reset works. How do I integrate that with on-prem? How do I set up policies? What do I need to know about licensing? Boom. There you go. Now I go back to my list. I feel up on SSPR. Maybe what I want to do is go down to a how-to guide. Oftentimes in here, they'll have some, this one doesn't have it, but like say virtual machines, they'll often have little short 5-minute, here's how you do the actual thing. I know in here that they do have all of the instructions for SSPR. We just didn't get to it when we were going through there. But that's really kind of how you use this. You go through each one of these and really you take a look at these, you read through them and you go, okay, which one of those, how do I feel about those? Do I feel like I know that? Do I feel like I need to dive into it? And then identify the ones you need to dig into more and do that. When you're going through the planning stages, you always want to plan based on these numbers because if you spend the bulk of your time on Azure AD and identities, but you don't spend a lot of time on virtual networking, you're going to be like Phil, who was like, why is all this stuff about NSGs and everything in the Azure exam? I'll tell you why. The glue, there's 2 pieces of glue and 2 things that you absolutely have to understand if you're working in Azure. It's Active Directory and virtual networking. If you're working in any cloud, it's virtual networking. Virtual networking is the foundation, it's the security layer, it is how everything works in your environment. If you do not understand virtual networking, it's going to be very difficult for you to be successful in the cloud because so many things rely on the networking level up there, which is much different than the on-prem world. So that's why it's 25 to 30% of the exam. So when you're planning out how you're going to go about your exam, make sure you take those times into account because it is going to be on the actual exam that those times are going to work out like that. Then down at the bottom, what they're going to do is they're going to tell you in red, these are the things that change for the exam. So you see for Azure AD, create administrative units. Notice here for configure Azure files and blob storage. I just had this update. This is one of my courses on Pluralsight. Simply what they removed from here is configure storage tiers for Azure Blob Storage. The reason being, there's storage tiers in Azure Files and there's a storage tiers in Azure Blobs. So they want to make sure that you're not just focusing on the tiers in Blob Storage, that you're also focusing on the tiers that you have available in Azure Files. So sometimes it'll be name changes. The last time they made a number of branding changes, so they made those changes. So this time around, there's not a lot of changes going on. So configure and use net, network performance, Azure Monitor for networks. So they're making a change here that now instead of using the network performance monitor for networking, you're using Azure Monitor for networks. So that might be a change in what you're studying. So you want to make sure you take a look at that as you're going through your exam, because let's say you had scheduled 6 months ago, you were going to take it the first week of June, and this exam changes on May 5th. You want to make sure that you're up to date on the latest and greatest that's out there. So the other thing I wanted to show real quick is, let's see.
So while you're doing that, you just brought up something that I thought is a really great topic that I'll throw out there. You can chime in on when you think it's appropriate. But you mentioned booking an exam, 6 months lead time. But I was going to ask you, someone who's unfamiliar with this process, how much time do you think is a realistic time to budget for studying for a topic, preparing for an exam? Obviously, everybody's different, but your thoughts when you get a chance on time invested to prepare in total.
Absolutely. I have that. I have that on the docket, so we will definitely cover that. It's
Perfect.
super important. So this is a tool. It's from a company called build59s.com. A couple MVPs run it. Unfortunately, it is out of date. They have a GitHub site, and I just haven't gotten the time to go in, and I had a plan to do within the next month of provide some updates for them for the 104 exam and the 303, 304. But what this does is, notice these are all kind of the same things that we see. They do a little assessment here where they have everything listed out, and you could go, I have no idea, I know a little, I know it well. And then you could do this on your own. You could throw all of it in a spreadsheet and you could track this. But what the nice thing is this, I should have filled this out before, it would actually tell you the percentage levels for you. So it gives you a nice way of you to be able to go through. So I would highly recommend, whether if they get this updated, if they have this available, or if you just do this on your own and go down the exam guide and go, where do I sit on these? Do I have any idea about this topic? Do I know it a little bit? Do I know it well? If you know it well, chances are that's going to be the last thing I'm going to spend my time studying on. I'm going to really try to dig into the things that I know a little bit about. But again, I'm also going to manage that against the percentage of the time here. So it's kind of like don't have the time tonight. I've got some things we'll talk about a little bit later where we'll be able to have some chats about this. But it's one of those things you just kind of have to get the kind of groove and kind of feel out, okay, how much time do I spend on some of those? So that's kind of a neat little tool that's come out. So I really should get back on that and get over there and help them out, because I do think it's a really, really super tool that they created there. So let's jump
I want
back
to also
into,
bring up there, Michael. What do you think about some of the practice exams and stuff like that? And like, how do you think that really helps with because for those who are anxious about exams and like, well, how do I answer this kind of questions and those kind of things?
I'm going to give you a short answer and a long answer a little bit. Absolutely
Okay.
critical to the process. So it's absolutely critical that you have some sort of testing function in it to get ready for the exam. So let's talk about you. Let's talk about resources. Let's see what the time is here, 8:36. So, okay. So books and white papers. Books is kind of like, it's really getting to the point where they can't push the books out fast enough. So I don't think books these days are really relevant, even though Warren Thomas would probably say that that's BS. But it's hard to get a book that's up to date and in a time frame that's going to work for you. So, if you need the written word, Microsoft Docs, use that technique that I showed you using the exam guide, go over to Docs and you spend a ton of time there, and also Microsoft Learn, and you're really good to go. Online content. You know, I don't usually plug Pluralsight. I love Pluralsight. I think we're a great platform. I think we have great authors and great content. If you're looking to study for the AZ-104 exam, I'm going to go on a limb and I'm going to say we've got the best content on anybody's platform. We have myself, and I got to work with Mike Teskey and Tim Warner on this to build an amazing set of resources for people. We've gotten a ton of really great feedback. So I'm going to provide an opportunity for all of you to be able to get a 30-day trial to Pluralsight. So if you're looking to do AZ-104, I've got a whole thing that we'll talk about. But find those online resources that work for you, that you trust. Classroom training, sure, you can do that. That costs a lot of money. It takes you away from work. Hands-on experience. My guess, everybody in this house here are visual, are hands-on. That's a really important part of how you learn. So make sure you include that in when you're going through this stuff. So, you know, getting the technical knowledge. We have our AZ-104 path. I've got the link here, but it's also going to be in the GitHub site that I have available. So you can go out there. It'll list all of the courses that are available. We do have, and it depends on your subscription level. If you have an enterprise subscription, your company may have access to our labs platform where we have hands-on labs that go along with the content. But if you don't, what I would recommend is getting a trial subscription to Azure. Follow along with the labs when you can. Most instructors try to build it so that you can follow along as well. And the other thing that I'll say is this, you know, it comes with the cost of the territory. If you have to spend $20 a month on some stuff you do in Azure to learn about something, you spent $20. Chances are you're going to get a return from that at a later time. You can also go to docs.microsoft.com. We already talked about that. That's probably the #1 resource. I had a student the other day contact me about something he had a question with. There was something that was a little jinky in my course that I ended up fixing that same day. But I told him, I'm like, yeah, you know, because he's like, hey, I see this on Docs, but it's like this in your course. I'm like, you know, Docs is the definitive answer. That's where the best practices are going to be. That's where the step-by-steps that Microsoft has you doing things. So the exam is going to be based on how things are done in Docs. So you want to make sure that that's an important part of your study. You can also go to Microsoft Learn. We showed you that the Microsoft Learn, the AZ-104, they've got ones for AZ-900. The AZ-900 path that they have there is great for people that are wanting to skill up at AZ-900. A lot of other great stuff over at Learn. They also have a lot of hands-on built into there, so they do have some opportunities for some free hands-on training that you can do through there. Mention the Microsoft account. I don't know if, and I apologize, I do not know if this is all still valid, 30 days or 200. The big thing that I will say, if you get a free account, there's a DevLab option that gives you cheaper rates, and it will also auto shut down all of your VMs. One of the key things that I like to do whenever I'm building stuff, and you will notice this in my courses, build everything in resource groups. And anybody that manages Azure, you manage your stuff at the resource group level. It's a great way for you to be able to manage your resources. But if I'm, let's say you're doing something that involves a couple virtual networks, some virtual machines, some storage and stuff like that, you throw it into a research group. When you're done with it, instead of having to go and delete each individual one, you delete the resource group. It asks you, are you sure? Type in the name of it. You click next, and it blows them all away. Done, gone. It's off of your subscription. So put those stuff into a resource group that you're using for your testing. That way you know where it is. Because like somebody like me, I've got a bunch of different resource groups. And sometimes I get kind of like, okay, what's that resource group? What's that resource group? So don't follow the way I do things, but the way I kind of talk about it, is a good idea to put that in there. So resources for studying for the certification. So I created out here over on little GitHub repo that I have, basically just a listing of a bunch of different resources. So many of the resources we've covered in here, but also ones along the way, certification blogs, Josh's blog on the AZ-103 exam. Even though it's AZ-103, it is one of the best blogs. Thomas Maurer, if you don't know who Thomas Maurer is, he is the consummate cloud advocate at Microsoft, talking about certifications in the pro space. He has a ton of certification posts. If you're looking at AZ-900, my good friend Sonia on the CDA team did a great one on Azure Fundamentals. Tim Warner, Mike Pfeiffer. So just some information for you to kind of give you one place for all of that. And chances are I'll probably be building this out because my plan is to give this talk more than just here in the Research Triangle. I hope to be able to give it out to some other people in the world to kind of share some of that knowledge. So I've got some tips in here on exam taking. I'm not going to dive into that because I don't want to spend the time tonight because I've got some other time to do into that. So got a couple things I want to wrap up with. Actually, I want to talk about next steps. So next steps, you need to make a plan. Figure out what search you're doing. Figure out how much time you need to spend. Yes, I know I need to talk about how much time in average you should put in here. You need to schedule the exam. Then you start studying. Number 2 is non-negotiable in my book. This commits you to the exam. Because if you just say, hey, I'm going to schedule it when I think I'm ready, when do you think you're going to schedule it? Never. Trust me on this. Because I've done this multiple times when I didn't schedule the exam. Once I schedule an exam, I hit that mark. If I need to change it, Pearson VUE makes it super easy to push your exam back. Let's say you need to go to a week or 2. My AWS exam, I have to push it out because of some stuff that came up at work. But schedule that exam, get the studying, and then just rock the exam. And we're going to talk about some things for doing that. So as far as making the plan, what do I recommend? I recommend you got to look at your schedule. You got to look at how much time you have. I think you need to spend a minimum of 1 hour a day. And maybe you only get a half hour, but then put an hour and a half on the weekends or 2 hours on the weekends. I did a talk at Tech Mentor a number of years ago, and I did a talk about how to upskill your career in hour day, 5 days a week. The month of lunches is built on the concept of learning something over your lunch hour. Make your lunch hour learning getting certified. You're probably gonna need a little bit more than an hour lunch every day to be really, really prepared. But if you've got the right resources, you've got a good plan, I think 30 to 45 days is the sweet spot for getting certified. And that might mean that you might need to put in 10, 12, depending on where you're at, 15 hours a week. But I know my students, when they were taking classes, most of them were putting in 10 to 15 hours for every class that they had a week. And those were going full-time and had a full-time job. I don't know how they did it, but they ended up doing it. But you need to make the commitment. Are you invested in your career and wanting to move forward? So the 30 to 45 day range for me is also, and this is something Josh and I have talked about and we both agree on, is that getting any longer than 45 days, you're just kind of playing around. You're just kind of putting things off. Is that commit to it, learn something, and learn something every day. Because if you push it out to 3 to 4 months, you're not going to be doing something every day, and you want to be learning something every single day. If you follow Josh and you read his knowledge worker stuff, he talks about how he's been able to skill up, and it's all based on the fact that he carved up the beginning of his day. He made a commitment to himself that he was going to spend an hour and a half of every day working on the most important things to him. TLDR, it wasn't his work job. It was his career that he wanted to build. And he spent an hour and a half writing because he wanted to be a writer. So that's how he wrote I Am Ansible, I think it is, or he's going to kill me for getting the title wrong, but his Ansible book.
Become Ansible.
Become Ansible, thank you. That's how he wrote that book, is because he made that commitment to learning that and taking some of the skills. So if you don't have the lunch hour to do it, can you carve out the beginning of the day? Can you get up before everybody? And I know that's hard. I know it's hard for me, but figure out how to do that. And I think you'll be fairly successful at doing that. So before I get to this last slide, there was something that I'm just going to kind of throw in here that some people that know me know that I'm a, kind of a Kanban fanatic, and I'm not going to go into the whole idea of Kanban and personal Kanban, and I like to call it personal DevOps, a way of just getting yourself organized. I use Trello to organize myself for certification planning, and as you can see here, basically what I did is I created a column, a board for each one of the objective domains. And then what I do is I break down in there everything that I need to do. This is a little generalized because I didn't want to create something that was just Pluralsight or just Microsoft or whatever. I wanted to make it a little bit more generic. But I would put my videos in here, my docs, my hands-on, my Watch My Microsoft. And then I would plan this out, and then I go in here and I set my dates. So I'm going to show you, and this might freak some people out, might think this is like over engineering. This is my board for studying for the SAA C02, the AWS Associate Architect exam. The cohort we're doing in a short story is we're having a bunch of people inside of Pluralsight use our resources and see how well they do on the exam. So I basically laid out all of the modules in the labs. I gave them due dates. Notice I'm a little bit behind here because we had some stuff happen at work. But I laid out a framework. I have a framework here, and I can visually see how am I doing? What do I have done? What do I need to work on so that I can go in here and be boom, boom, boom. By the time I get over to my exam date, this is going to change, all of this will be green. Hopefully I'll have gone through all of my architected framework documentation and everything, and I will be ready to jump into my exam. So that's just one way of that, I kind of go about, planning some of those. So I want to finish up my slides. Then I'm going to go and circle back to some of the questions that came up that both Phil and Mike, and if I don't make them, we can remind them. What I'm going to be starting off on the June 7th, 2021, I'm going to be doing a certification follow along. And what this is if you're interested in getting certified in AZ 104, we're going to run this for 30 to 45 days. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to provide a more detailed framework. So a lot of the stuff that I kind of introduced you to, I'm going to go deeper into that. I'm going to go deeper into how you break down the exam guide and learn some sort of things. So I'm going to do this through a number of things. I'm going to do some weekly videos where I'm going to break down, here's how to come up with a plan. I'm going to break down how to think about certification questions and how to think about the certification material and how to translate to that exam. So we're going to do that through some videos, maybe some podcasts, maybe some newsletters. This is a first trial run. So anybody that's in this is, you're going to be kind of, eating some dog food, but at the end of the day, it should be good for you. It's not a boot camp. I'm not going to be each week teaching you every single thing that's on the exam guide. I'm going to be guiding you to the materials that are going to help you to do that. It's upon you to put together a plan and get to work. My guide is to mentor you through the process over 30 to 45 days to hopefully get you all certified in AZ 104. And if you don't have a subscription to Pluralsight and you're interested in using our platform, I'm going to have an option for you to get a free 30-day trial for that. So I have a survey link, bit.ly/AZCertCamp. Real quick survey, just gives you your name, email address, whether or not you're interested in the free 30-day, and I will get you into that program. Let's say you've already taken AZ 103 and you're interested in 303 or 304 or AZ 500. There's still going to be some value to you for this. The reason is this follow along is going to be focused on a framework for getting certified. While it's focused on AZ 104, the concepts will still carry over. And I would be happy to, if say you're working on AZ 500, even though I haven't taken the exam, I would be happy to put together a little bit of guidance for that. I do also know some coworkers that maybe they'd want to jump in and help out that have taken AZ 500 and those sorts of things. So if you're thinking, I've already done AZ 104, I really want to do 303, I want to do 500, this thing isn't relevant to me. It's absolutely going to be relevant because I'm going to break down how you think about things in order to be able to answer the questions on the exam. I'm going to be talking about how to put together a plan for you to be able to get through all of the material that you're looking to get through. So this is me kind of throwing myself out there as a way to, again, give back to a great community. Going on another Don Jonesism that I believe this was from Be the Master. He talked about we've had so many teachers in our lives. The best way to thank a teacher for all the work they've done is to become a teacher and to share your knowledge with the other people. And that's what all of you here at the Research Triangle do. Mike, Phil, everybody that contributes, that's what you're doing. You're helping push along that concept of being a teacher. So if you're interested in that, I'd love to have you along, love to give you some feedback. Let me go back here real quick just so that the link's up there. I'm only going to ask one thing in this for you is if you choose to do the free 30-day Pluralsight subscription, I'm just going to ask you to do a survey. And I want you to give me blunt feedback that I can take back to my company to tell us whether or not we're actually building great content. I think we are. I've had a lot of learners tell us that their content helped them, but I would love for anyone that goes through this, that uses our material, I want to know whether that helped you or not. I want to know where we missed the mark so that the next time when we update these, we get that in there so that we can help future learners and those sorts of things. So if you're willing to take that survey at the end, I would love to get that feedback on that and the whole process. So with that, I think we've got the wrap up. I think Phil, you had Mike, we talked about the time.
Well, I
Phil,
think
you
one of the
had
things that
another question about something.
I didn't want to say, I just wanted to say other motivation factors. I really like your whole camp idea. Is studying and working with a team is a really great thing to do. So, we are here personally a community. One of the things that, I did actually, I'm in the background chatting with another colleague. It's like, hey, we need to do that exam again. And so when I told you a while ago, we're all architects. And we're like, we're both going to take a Citrix exam. And, but, it's far our field, but I was like, all right, you know what? Whoever gets the lowest score on the exam buys the other guy lunch. And that's what it did. And so here it is. We both scheduled on the exact same day. And we're like, are you ready? No, I need another week. So we both pushed ourselves back. And then, okay, here we are. Are we ready? And kind of put this thing in, and it kind of motivated both of us to do it. And so here it is. And I just laid it out right there. I scheduled the next exam. So now it's on him to schedule it. And here we go. We're going to start this exam. And so it kind of does this motivation to say, you know what? There's no time like the present. And also, you can only make yourself better through this process. And so even if you don't, go through the whole process, it could only improve yourself. And this is what I think is the great part about this. And it kind of motivates me here. So boom, I threw it in chat, like boom, I registered for an exam right now. I got my exam scheduled. So, and I put 60 days just because I have work, but I didn't do 45. 45 is a little cutting it for me.
Yeah, for sure. So I did want to answer, Scott had a question, but AZ-104, will we need to back up and do AZ-900 in the future before? Sounds like a little Back to the Future thing going on there, or Doctor Who jumping in my TARDIS. But I'm bummed. I don't think so. Depends on where you're at in the Azure world. Scott, what I'd recommend you do is go over and take a look at what's in AZ-900, and depending on when you go through that, if you feel like you need to take AZ-900, then do it. What I would recommend is if you feel like some of those areas in AZ-900 you need to skill up on, go do the Microsoft Learn AZ-900, the Azure Fundamentals follow through that has some demos and has a lot of reading, some videos and stuff like that. That will provide you the ground. It's AZ-900 is not required to do AZ-104, but for those people that are brand new, it's a good on-ramp for that. So I don't think you need to go take it, but just check it out to see if any of those things are areas where you feel like you need to dive in some more.
So, gentleman John has a question about, I'm not sure if he understands what Pluralsight is. He wants to know if there's different types. So there are different, I guess you could say there's different membership levels. And I am a member of Pluralsight. I've been a member for, I think, 5 years. And I renew every year. I usually get the lower of the two because I believe the upper gives you the tests. And a lot of times I'm using it just to learn about technologies for work, but fantastic resource. So, Michael, maybe you could speak a little bit about Pluralsight and the two different memberships that are available.
Can I clarify?
Go, John.
Sure.
Certainly. Maybe I'm probably phrasing this poorly. It's been a long day, so I apologize.
That's okay.
I wanted to see if I can find out if the subscription I have is to an alumni program, and I'm trying to see if I can access these same resources that you'd be using for this cloud camp or whatever non-boot camp term we're using.
Can you say that again? I'm sorry. I got sidetracked by a message that popped up. Little squirrel.
I think he's wondering. I think he's wondering is the resources that you talked about to follow along. Does he need to be a part of Pluralsight to access those? He's a Pluralsight member through an alumni organization, and he's concerned that he may not be able to have access to your resources.
Oh, So here's the way this works is that I've got these 30-day access codes, and you go to this website and you put in an email address, maybe go to outlook.com and create a new email address, and there you go. You may be able to add it to an existing certification, an existing account that you have. I will find out more information on that. I will have, when I roll out the free 30 days for everybody, I will give you detailed instructions of what you need to be in there, but it will provide you a full 30-day access to all of our entire video platform. I don't believe it includes our lab platform, but it will have all of the video content that's available on there. So,
So John, does that cover your question? You think we hit what you were looking for there?
Yeah, I just am not 100% sure if the alumni version I have includes whatever resources or not. So I guess I will just say I'm interested. I was just debating if I want to check the box if I'm interested or not. So
yeah, just go ahead and check the box. What you can always do is if you go into your alumni subscription, just go to the search box and type in AZ-104. It'll give the learning path as one of the options. Go see if you have access to the learning path. And if you do, great. If you don't, then we'll get you on that subscription and you'll be good to go.
Okay, I am seeing it. Azure Administrator preparing by Tim Warner. Looks like oh, I see. I think I see what you're talking about here. Yeah,
Sure.
I think I found it. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, and if John, if let's say you do jump in, you're working with us, working through the follow along, and you don't have access to what you need for that, just let me know and be happy to get you set up. So
Thank you.
if you have a Visual Studio subscription, you have a free 6-month subscription to Pluralsight. That is correct. My understanding, that is a limited set of courses that are in there. I do not know whether or not this is in there, but it is a nice benefit to having Visual Studio that you do have access to a number of different courses from Pluralsight.
Michael, in all the time that you've been teaching technology, what is the most common issue that you've run into IT folks in keeping their skills up to date? Because you've been doing this for a long time.
Time and motivation. I'm just going to be perfectly honest because I can tell you that there was a time in my career where, and it was kind of the career that led me to be an MVP and kind of really kind of set me off, where it was Server 2008. I was working on the betas. I was doing everything. I got an offer to do a book deal. I started doing some certification things with Microsoft. I started really, really being invested in being ahead of the curve. And then in 2011, my son was born, and I took about 3 years off of really, really being invested in technology. And it's taken me a really, really long time to catch up. And so a lot of it for a lot of people is simply the time. And I think a lot of it too is, and this, this kind of, your question really sums up the reason why people should go get certified. People don't have a map. It's like if your boss says, go learn Azure, what do you do? It's not like the old days where you could get a virtual machine running a server and go learn how to install DHCP and how to run DHCP and that sort of stuff. Most people, when I talk to, even seasoned IT people, they get a free account up in Azure. They have no idea what to do with it because it's nothing like we've ever done. So the cloud certifications really provide that framework for really providing you a way to figure out what to work on. That especially, docs on Microsoft.com, you go to the tutorials that they have, they just walk you through building stuff. So if you want to learn how to do anything in Azure, it's in Docs. Because I can tell you, having worked at Microsoft, the number one thing on our metrics was getting people into Docs, because we knew the more people ingested and used the Docs and Microsoft.com, the more that they used Azure. And that's not like some dirty secret. It's just plain business sense. If your users know more about your product, they're going to use more of your products. So I think, long answer to your question, sum it up, time, motivation. I think just learning something new every day and, having a framework to learn these new technologies, I think is really so important for people.
So, Michael, let me say thank you. This was really a fantastic presentation tonight. Uh, Lots of people enjoyed this. You gave people lots of useful, pertinent information that I think is more than just watching someone evangelize, like go take a test. So, really appreciate that. Um, so, Michael approached us, oh, geez, almost 6 months ago, maybe, and said, "Hey, I'm working on this thing. I want to come and do it at your group. Would you guys be interested?" And of course, we said yes because we love the content he does. So we're thankful that you thought of us and were willing to share. Everybody seems to have joined this very much tonight. I'm going to ask people who attended if you have any final thoughts or questions you want to reach out to Michael. Maybe think about doing that now. We're going to sum up here in just a few minutes, and then we'll be wrapping this one up for tonight. So go
okay.
ahead, Phil.
I was having a question. I was actually answering the question to somebody in the chat, but I want to get your opinion there, Michael, about so if I have like vouchers for the 303 and 304, the architect stuff, and I work as an architect, but should I go back to the 104 just for that kind of thing? And so my opinion, just to throw it out there, what I was writing in chat was it really helped me with I think AZ 103. That's what I have before AZ 104, just before it ended. Anyway, the point being is that it really helped me understand it, kind of like I mentioned it before, is that I was like, wow, I'm in Azure and I need to learn about like the monitoring portion and then the NSGs, the network gateways, and all that other stuff. I'm like, why am I learning all this other stuff? And then when I finally went to the 303, I'm like, hey, now I needed that fundamentals to get me to this 303 stuff. And so I'm like, okay, now I truly understand all the stuff. Now, granted, I understand most of the architecture, but in the inner workings, I needed those other pieces in the background. And would you also suggest that, hey, unless you're doing it every day, you probably need to start with the 104 or the 103, that works. You're muted, Mike. Michael, you're muted.
I think the 104 is a great place to start, even if you're an Azure architect, because as you said, there were things that you didn't know being an architect, because that is generally how it is. The way the design exam is, you're not building it, you're designing it. You're designing it at the concept level. The associate, the 104 exam, is really you're administering it. So you're doing the administration, the things that you would have like a mid-level engineer do. They're not going to put all of your pieces together, but they're work with those. And the other thing that I would throw in there is that even if you are an architect and an admin, I think it's worthwhile for you to take a look at the AZ900. The reason being, none of those other ones go over subscriptions in depth. They don't go over pricing. They don't go over the things that, like I mentioned before, a lot of engineers just spin stuff up in Azure, and next thing they know, they've got a $1,000 bill because they didn't understand how the pricing and how the subscriptions and how that all works. Is that even if you don't take the exam, I think that anyone can really get a great understanding of Azure from the fundamental, the Azure Fundamentals, the AZ900 stuff. There's tons of stuff in there that's so good for you to understand that it really builds a good foundation for you.
So let's take this back to the beginning and wrap this up. So we talked about the value of certifications and how they've evolved dramatically so that the certifications represent real world skill sets. They show you, they give you value in the industry. They prove a level of competency. And as Michael had said early on, they really say that when you pass certain exams, you are able to do a specific job or function in the industry. That's what that's what the certifications are testing. So it really is in everybody's best interest to invest some time in themselves, even if you don't take the exams, at least the learning path. And one thing I want to touch on that has come up at least 5 times in the chat this evening, um, this mention of I really want to do it. I always fall down, have trouble getting started. The month of lunches concept is really a great way to sort of tackle this issue. Yes, you probably need to put in an hour or two a day, at least a couple times a week. But you know what? If you could put in a half hour, it's a half hour. And as you get going, you'll roll and you'll find more time. Don't make the barrier to starting that you don't have a 4-hour block to commit to doing it. Give yourself 20 minutes, 30 minutes to concentrate on a topic. Digest it, even in small pieces. If you can't do it in 30 days, that's fine. But the worst thing is to not start at all.
Yeah. You know, and I'll just do a quick plug here for anybody that's been around Pluralsight for a while knows that sometimes some of our courses can be a bit long. We specifically went into these certification learning paths with I had one course that came in at an hour. Most of them were 30 to 45 minutes. We set that as our bar as a team because the content is all laser focused on what you need for the exam. It's not the 5-hour kitchen sink deep dive into Azure networking. It is just the facts. So when you're going in and studying for this, don't feel like you need to be an architect. Don't feel like you need to be Phil. Feel like, okay, I'm an admin. So if it's not on that list, you don't need to know it. So for AZ-104, you don't need to know anything about architecting. You just need to know about whatever is on that list and learn those things. So last thing I just wanted to say, I cannot, because of this stupid desktop web thingy, I can't go and give everyone an emoji, but I want to thank every single one of you that came out tonight. I appreciate all of the thank yous. I appreciate that you thought this was a great presentation. My boy down in the southern hemisphere, Glenn, thank you for being on here. We need to resurrect that talk that we did in the PowerShell book about how to do presentations for the DevOps and Automation Summit. But other than that, thank you, everybody. I hope this was worthwhile. And again, if you're interested in joining into this little follow-along thing, it's going to be interesting. It'll be fun. Everybody will learn something. And Phil might give you prizes.
All right. So if you're watching along at home, we've gone more than 90 minutes tonight, what I think was really valuable information. But if you made it to the end here, kudos to you. Thank you for spending the time with us tonight. If you are interested in these kinds of talks and you want to see more, come check us out at rtpsug.com or on Meetup. You can find the name of the group, Research Triangle PowerShell User Group. We meet on the first and third Wednesday of the month, and everybody is welcome. You don't need to be an expert in a topic, just need to have a desire to learn some stuff. So thank you to Michael Bender for spending time with us tonight. Thank you for everyone who participated. We'll see you next time.